One of the
Yeah.
things, though, that I think is interesting is that from our last episode with you, we talked about how the Philippines, under the current president, Bongbong Marcos Jr., was threatening to leave ASEAN over the lack of support from ASEAN countries, as you've kind of alluded
Mhm.
to, specifically about the South China Sea, because I think most countries in ASEAN can see the US puppet strings about that scenario. I think currently should be at the 47th ASEAN summit right now in Kuala Lumpur, although by the time that we air this on Thursday, it would have already been gone and done. And he is going to be chairing ASEAN in
Mhm.
2026. So it's a formal handover from Malaysia to the Philippines. Now,
Mhm.
can you give us an assessment of how you think he will seek to influence the ASEAN bloc's strategic decision? Because as you said, he's kind of an outlier in ASEAN in terms of his attitude towards China. And also, there's no indications that he will be sort of moving away from an alignment from the US right now, right? So, what is your
Mhm.
assessment of how this is going to shake down, in your opinion, in 2026?
Yeah. Actually, it's still not our time to be the chair of ASEAN in 2026. It's just so happened that Myanmar cannot handle the chairmanship by 2026. So it was passed on the Philippines because it's alphabetical. So that's the reason why. So now in Kuala Lumpur, I think officially speaking, Bongbong Marcos and President Marcos Jr. already accepted the chairmanship in 2026 as passed on by Malaysian government or by the Malaysian chair. So now it's very interesting to be frank with you. And almost everyone, my friends from different parts of the world at the moment is asking me the same question. What do you think will Bongbong Marcos or Manila? How they gonna handle the chairmanship in 2026? What will be the priority? And the next question is how ASEAN-China relation would look like under a Philippine chairmanship under a presidency of Marcos Jr. So these are the questions that every now and then being asked to me in the last, what, 2 weeks? So that's what I'm asking. But and I think it's like this, no? I think it's very interesting, to be frank with you, that the Philippines will have the chairmanship in 2026 in an era where you can see that the strategic competition and rivalry between China and the United States, if you really look at it and assess, it's really intensifying, not just geopolitically speaking, but economically speaking. So the pressure for other countries, even ASEAN member state, is how to maintain neutrality in all of this, but at the same time to maintain good relation with both, because most countries, they need both. And I think as far as ASEAN member states are concerned, not necessarily the Philippines, but other, like for example, Malaysia and the rest, and even Vietnam, Thailand, and all of these countries. And now we have an additional member. We have East Timor being part of the group. Yeah, officially accepted in this summit in KL. So from what I know, from my conversation with counterparts in ASEAN, ASEAN member states, as much as possible, wants to have a good relation with China, especially in the economic front, because most of them rely on China for investment in everything, infrastructure, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and all of others, and even part of BRICS. Because you have Indonesia already, then you have Thailand and Malaysia would follow through in membership in BRICS. So they need China, economically speaking. But there are also realization from ASEAN member state, not just the Philippines, that in a way they need to maintain good relation with the United States precisely because of security and balancing. Because most countries in Southeast Asia, they have what you call hedging. They balance their relation, but at the end of the day, they want to be neutral. That's really pretty much the idea, except for the Philippines at the moment, which is very much close to the United States, not just economically, I think, but even geopolitically speaking and foreign policy wise, because our foreign policy to a greater extent, sometimes we laugh about it as being dictated by Washington. It's not our foreign policy, but it's Washington foreign policy in every way. So now the most interesting question is, given this kind of context and scenario, how Marcos Jr. will navigate the chairmanship of the Philippines in 2026. Very interesting, not only for China, but for the rest of Southeast Asia and the world. The way I see it is, I think Manila will first and foremost prioritize or will highlight the issue on the maritime dispute in the South China Sea. That will be a center. The way I see it, potentially that will be the center stage of the ASEAN chairmanship of the Philippines, the South China Sea or the maritime dispute. Now, the question only is, what is the priority in this maritime dispute? I think Manila will be focusing more on the COC negotiation or the Code of Conduct negotiation. I think they will push for that because if you listen to Marcos Jr.'s statement before in relation to the South China Sea issue, in relation to ASEAN, he mentioned several times about the Code of Conduct and he wants to have a binding Code of Conduct. And even before he proposed that a Code of Conduct only among Southeast Asian countries, excluding China. But you cannot exclude China. China is the bigger player in here. So that's why I wrote an article about that saying like you cannot exclude the other party. If you want a functional code of conduct, you need to have China in there. So for me, in the ASEAN chairmanship of Philippines, I think the center stage would be the maritime issue, more on the negotiation of the code of conduct in the South China Sea. And then that is something very interesting because we have to look and probably observe how the negotiation and how the statement will be crafted. Would it be very forthright, issue-based, and strong statement? Because, Manila, there's a possibility. I'm not saying it will happen. We will see. But maybe there's a possibility that Marcos Jr.'s government would want to elevate at a regional level the issue, its own stand and narrative when you talk about the South China Sea, regionally speaking. Because right now, if you look at it, it's between China and the Philippines. So you have this some kind of bilateral negotiation and exchange of narrative, which in many ways are very conflicting. And also it's a source of tension between the two countries. But when the Philippines become the chairman of ASEAN next year, there's a possibility that the Marcos government or Manila will elevate it at the regional level. So pushing for its national agenda and make it a regional agenda. Now, the interesting part is, would other countries in ASEAN agree to it? I don't think so, too. I don't think Malaysia would agree to it. I don't think Singapore or Vietnam. I think there will be debates on that issue. And the risk, if Marcos Jr. will push for this, is trying to regionalize the South China Sea issue agenda of the Philippines, is it will dilute what you call ASEAN unity, because definitely there will be disagreement among ASEAN member states. So that is a challenge for Manila, how it can calibrate its own agenda, its own national agenda that it wants to regionalize. At the other hand, how other countries in ASEAN will react to it. Because from what I know, I don't think Cambodia, Laos, and all of these countries would agree to a very strong statement against China, especially when you talk about communique. I don't think so. So that's one challenge for Manila. The other one, I think, is Marcos Jr. or Manila will try to compartmentalize. So maritime issue, and then you have the economic side. Because if you look at ASEAN, there's also the economic dimension. ASEAN right now is focused on regional integration, making it the center, and also regional integration in a sense that trade should be in intra-ASEAN trade should be deepened more. And so that is a priority of the Philippines, especially when you talk about issues of energy and issues of climate change, because we are experiencing a lot of climate change related issues and, typhoon and storm, all of these things. I think this will be prioritized also by the Manila. However, I think they will try to compartmentalize the two, the maritime and also this regional economic integration through different mechanisms like ACTA, like the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement, the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Partnership Agreement among ASEAN plus China and others. So I think this will be the dynamics. But definitely, I'm not kidding, definitely Manila will push the center stage. And when you talk about security dynamics, that's where it will revolve. Now, the challenge on my side, if Marcos Jr. wants to have a productive chairmanship of ASEAN, I think what he needs to do is to isolate the maritime issue of the South China Sea, even in the discussion of the Code of Conduct or negotiation in the Code of Conduct during its chairmanship, outside of the so-called great power competition among superpowers. It should be isolated. it should be discussed among ASEAN member states plus China, but outside of this rivalry between the United States and China. It can be done. And I think if Marcos Jr. will have the political will to do that, then the chairmanship of the Philippines of ASEAN in 2026 will be more productive and fruitful. And I think the ASEAN centrality, unity, and neutrality will be preserved, and there will be less disagreement among member states in ASEAN. However, the problem is, as you have said earlier, Liana, the Philippine foreign policy is leaning to the United States. Very much obvious that the United States has a hand on our side, not only on foreign policy, but even in other affairs of the country. I know it very well. So that is a challenge for us as a country, but it's something that we need to probably look forward to and observe and see in 2026. So many people are interested in this at the moment because many are on the edge. What Manila will do? Will Manila be able to preserve and pursue whatever kind of gains and productivity that the Malaysian chairmanship was able to achieve? Or would it deviate from there? Because if you look at the Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN, it focused more on trying to push for ASEAN centrality. If you look at Malaysian chairmanship of ASEAN, it centers on economic unity and economic integration, less on geopolitics. Now, the challenge for the Philippine chairmanship in 2026 is to follow through with this too. The gains of the Indonesian chairmanship and the Malaysian chairmanship. Now, if it deviates, it means it would focus more on geopolitics, centering the South China Sea issue, which is for me would be unfortunate. I hope not.
I think it's very interesting because this year we've seen Xi Jinping in several speeches emphasize international law and the UN code of conduct, stuff like that. So I think it's really an interesting thing of how Bongbong is going to center the South China Sea using the same rhetoric when China seems to be also using it, but maybe in a more genuine way. So how that's going to shake out is very, very interesting. But I also suspect in terms of economics, if the US has control over the Philippines, they're going to sabotage any type of economic development type of deal. So we'll see.
Yeah, the economic is very problematic too on
Yeah, I
our
mean,
side. Yeah.
that's the thing is that the thing about your answer, which is both hopeful and a bit sad, is that there is a way forward. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you're
Yeah.
showing this is what the Philippines should do to actually help their own country. But with the US as an outsized influence and really control over the Philippines, you can see how they can sabotage this in all areas. So we'll see what happens. But
Yeah, in a way, the United States is already sabotaging the Philippines at the moment, given the imposition of 19% tariff trade. Yeah, 19% of Philippine goods that would enter the United States market will have a 19% tariff, which would cripple our local industries exporting products to the United States. But that is not the only case, because they also asked Marcos Jr. that US products entering the Philippine market should have zero tariff. And these are sensitive products because it has something to do with agricultural products, like even automobiles and all of this. For other people, they see it's not critical, but actually these are critical products that entering in the Philippine market that Trump said, we want you to have zero tariff, don't tax our products. Some Filipino who does not understand economics said, okay, it's good because we will have cheap American goods. I said, no, that's not how it works when you talk about trade, you know? If you don't have tariff, you lose what? According to the Bureau of Custom, we will lose around 30 billion pesos if we don't tax the US goods that would enter the Philippine market. But on our side, we will lose a lot because of the 19% tariffs. The United States already sabotaging the Philippine economy at this time. Now, the question is, I thought we are an ally. And I thought we are a best friend of the United States. Why in the hell they're doing this to us? So that's even a question, as early as now. So that's not geopolitics.